everybody. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn today. We are here to talk about a very interesting topic. We're talking about being mirrors of ourselves in a working relationship. And I think this is a fascinating topic because I think so often it's easy to get frustrated at, maybe something that somebody else did or somebody else that we work with is doing. And we may not necessarily realize that it could be us that's impacting them and how they're treating us and our perception of them. And so we've got a really interesting guest. Her name is Laura Castanza. Laura is the Director of Education for Team Horner Group, where she is an agent of change. Laura is an expert in integrating conscious thought and mindful action into work and being successful at work. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
And thanks for having me, Garrett.
So we're here to talk about how to be mirrors of ourselves at work. So I guess maybe to get started, what does that even mean?
Well, basically we mirror one another. That's the whole concept, is that when we meet another person and we have an emotional reaction to that person, either for the positive or for the negative, that we are seeing something in them that is operating within us. So if I'm in a mentor relationship and it's positive and we're growth oriented, then we're mirroring those positive attributes. But say I go into the workplace and I have a coworker that things don't quite align with us, what is it about that person that is triggering me to feel the way that I do, which might not be, again, positive.
That is so fascinating. I'm a huge fan of The Office, the TV show, the American TV show. Mm-hmm. And immediately when I hear you describe this, I think of the relationship between Michael Scott and Toby. Do you watch the TV show The Office?
No.
Okay, well, I'll give you some context. So Michael Scott is the branch manager for this paper company called Dunder Mifflin. And his director of HR is a guy named Toby. And he and Toby just butt heads all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, most of the ideas Michael has as the branch manager are horrible, like off-the-wall ideas, like you probably shouldn't do this in a business, probably not necessarily the most ethical moves in the world. And Toby's like, hey, we really can't do this. And essentially Michael perceives him as the killer of fun. But the point I'm making in all of this is, why is Michael frustrated at Toby? And it's something with him, and I think maybe what you're kind of getting to, what you're alluding to, is that Michael may know that some of his ideas might be wrong or like on the edge of like, maybe I shouldn't do this in a workplace environment. And Toby's kind of bringing out his own worst fears. Am I kind of touching onto something there?
Oh, definitely. It's something that might be repressed and the other person is expressing it. So it's, there's a conflict within about how, what that is.
Yeah.
So,
tell me some examples. I'd love to learn. When did you become consciously aware of this? When did this become something that came onto your radar, that you knew that you wanted to study this and focus and learn more about this?
Sure. I've been working on myself since my 20s, and that was my own self-awareness, my own spiritual awakening. And in that, I connected with a very good friend of mine and a mentor. Her name is Julia, and she and I have really had a friendship that's been based around spiritual and higher consciousness, and we also worked together. We had an art gallery together that had to do with music, art, and spirituality. And this is the art, you were commenting on the art earlier, and this is some of that from that. So in doing so, I've always been very interested in the mind and the soul and how we travel. And this work is basically shadow work. It's really looking at our deeper self and understanding what is driving us. And by doing so in that self-awareness, we're allowed the opportunity to really improve our situations by becoming aware of how we feel and how we're acting or responding or reacting to things around us. And a lot of us as human beings, we tend to point fingers and blame and look for outside influences when they're really inside influences that are mirroring or coming up as an event or circumstance or someone in our environment that's representing that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because you hear these things like a quarter life crisis or a midlife crisis, and people end up getting to a rut, almost a point where they've been so frustrated with the routine that they've been in for so long that they finally said, "Hooey, I'm going out and doing my own thing." And it makes me think to myself, how could we be consciously? It makes me ask the question: how can we be more consciously aware of these potential feelings and how they could be impacting our work?
Well, it's really about wanting to implement a change, and that change is within. A lot of times it's very difficult work to face ourselves. It's the hardest work, I think, on the planet. But once we do, and once we open up ourselves, usually we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's the old adage. And once we're ready to do that, then we open the door for the people in our lives, or who will enter our lives, who will help us on that journey. And then it's a matter of facing our feelings and being okay with how we feel and who we are and where we are, and making incremental changes through that awareness. But we have to stay aware. And that's the hardest thing, because it's easy to turn off and go back to old patterns. And that happened in a job of mine, where I got this job, and the owner was great, and talk about a mirror. We were, really mirroring the positive side, and then it turned darker because we had old patterns in play and we played off of those. And I was working on myself, but it was a lot of reality to face that. And once I did, and once I accepted it, then everything changed. So
that's interesting, because I would imagine that a lot of leaders for companies might think to themselves, well, I don't want my people doing any of this. I want everybody to be kind of like, stay the same and don't change. You're in a great role. Keep everything like the exact same and everything will be fine. Why is this empowering to your people? Why is it important to empower and encourage your people to have these self-reflection moments, so then they can be in charge and feel like they're in charge of their own lives? Why is this, from a business perspective, why does this make sense?
Because it fuels our creativity. And once we're allowed to be who we are and we accept who we are, then we accept things around us, we adapt, we end up thriving instead of just surviving. So it's really important. And luckily, I've been blessed to be in a company culture that really promotes that. The leader is just kind of fun-loving, and he's tried all different things. So he's, how could you not follow that? And so he attracts it. So there's a lot of awareness that's going on, and people wanting to improve, and we have our wellness programs in place that, try to prompt change.
And I would imagine that actually, by investing in your people to be a catalyst for this change and to inspire change within them consistently, that they will be even more grateful and almost reward the company with not only retention and staying with the company longer, but a consistent feeling of growth over time. It can almost eradicate that feeling of stagnation, because they feel like they are constantly going to a new level within themselves and within their company, and their company is empowering to do that, as opposed to stifling those ideas and thoughts. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about growth. So if you don't promote the growth within yourself and then the people around you, business doesn't grow. The earth doesn't grow. Things don't grow. So stagnation is the worst. You're trying to bottle up something or hang on to something, and every time we do that, we kill it. Either literally or figuratively. It dies in some form or fashion. So hopefully with, looking at that, we go, okay, let me not do that again. Let me try a new approach. And I think new approaches are very important for us to look at and to try and to take that risk, because there's nothing like the pain of staying the same. That's a hard identity to keep trying to hold up, is trying to stay the same when we just don't. Our mind changes, our feelings about things change, and that's okay.
And that's a massive paradigm shift from like the previous notion of like, hey, you get hired at a company, you stay there for 35, 40 years, and you retire. And that's a notion that is constantly being updated and changing. Not to say that people can't stay the same place at the same for an extended period of time, but I think what you are saying is that they need to, in their minds, feel like they are growing, because if they are not, they are going to falter. I think it makes me think of, so I'm a big fan of Reid Hoffman, the guy that started LinkedIn, and he has a podcast called Blitz. And in Blitz, he talks about when he hires people, he hires them for tours of duty. And by that, all I mean is he doesn't hire someone and then just say, hey, for an extended period of time, you're going to be doing XYZ thing. He literally points to a date and time and says, by this date and time, something will happen. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And it just constantly gives someone something. It constantly gave his people something to look forward to, because they knew, okay, well, I know something's going to happen. Maybe I get a raise, maybe I get a promotion, maybe I get a new territory, maybe I get a new work task, whatever it could be. It constantly allowed his people to feel that sense of growth. Now, I think you're describing this more on a personal level, but that could be a tip and tactic for a company to begin implementing this for their people, so that they can start, seeing the opportunities for growth and minimizing this idea of routine and stagnation within their work over time. Is that
Sure.
relevant?
Well, it's a way to introduce change. It's a way to make change routine in some way, because we really like security and we grasp onto that. That's the reason we want things to stay the same, is because we feel secure in what we're doing. Once we release that control, or we have a notion that something will change at a period of time, then we're better prepared, maybe. Sometimes we're not. That again is a personal journey, but I think that's a dynamite thought process,
Yeah, and I want to take this with stride, because I think any bit of change, whether we're talking about from a managerial level, like, hey, like, this is a pretty radical idea about change, like, I'm in this mentoring relationship, I don't know if I can necessarily feel comfortable opening up about these ideas that, potentially we're proposing right now on this Lunch and Learn. What I'd love to learn from your perspective is this actually beneficial to have these conversations in your mentor conversations, just to throw out your ideas, your concerns? I think some leaders might think, well, if I throw it out, they might think that this is an expectation that it's going to happen, even though I don't really know. Or another mode of thought might be, well, shoot, you might as well put it out there to learn get a pulse on what they're thinking about it is, and just be transparent and vulnerable and honest, saying, hey, I don't really know if this is something we may want to do, but as someone in my mentoring relationship, I'd love to bounce this off of you confidentially.
Well, I think you do that. I'm participating in, I'm in my third month, and in the month 2, you talk about sharing ideas and collaborating, and that the part of the collaborating is putting yourself on stage and presenting ideas, and you say, hey, present 3 ideas, and your mentor does as well, and then you have to pick one, so you can appreciate all of them, but honestly, you come down to picking one, and it might be a fusion of what 2 people think. So as long as I think we promote the creativity and the no fear, because that's, it's fear or love. We've got 2 choices in life. We approach something with love, or we approach it in fear, and fear is no fun. It's much better in a loving way. So if you really rally that type of feeling as much as you can with your team, then I think you're going to have a lot on the plate and a lot of ideas and a lot of light in the room to make positive changes for both the team on a personal level, and then the business and the professional level.
That was a golden piece of wisdom right there. I want to just take a moment to rewind. People do things out of fear or love. That's fascinating. we want to avoid people doing things out of fear. We want to avoid people staying with their company because they fear they might not get a job somewhere else. We want them to stay with their company because they love the work that they're doing. How can we, I mean, we threw out a couple of ideas. Are there any other tactics that we can be intentionally focused on as leaders within our companies to, or just members within our companies, to constantly realign ourselves to really reinforce why we feel like, why we are choosing out of love to be in the place that we are working?
Well, anytime that we have programs that reinforce it, or appreciation, good communication within the team, and an openness, and just really reinforcing the stage that you create or the environment that you create to promote that. Not everybody's going to feel like that because we all have a personal story running. But given that, even if we have that personal story, if we're not aligning with it, then something will change to either move us along, shift us in another area, or again, we'll be forced to grow, even as painful as it might be, but it'll be for the betterment. So
absolutely. Well, and we see this right now with coronavirus and a lot of people having to work remotely, having to change where they work, what they work on, how they work. And this is absolutely something going on right now. But it sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, this is an opportunity for growth, or this is a avenue for fear and negativity. It's just what you choose, and that you actually have the choice, that it can be one way or the other. Is that correct?
yes, it's really one way or the other. We can't hold a space for love and hold a space for fear at the same time. One's operating, the other's not. And they can switch roles. We can go in and out of fear and love, for sure. So it's just a matter of sticking it out. And again, emotional awareness or emotional intelligence, that's another way of saying it. Once we become aware of how we feel, then we can, make better choices and step into coming from the place of love or openness, or we're going to retract and run away.
It sounds like being mirrors of ourselves is the ultimate in accountability. I mean, when I think about it, it's as opposed to blaming others for my frustrations about something going on at work, I need to blame myself. I need to look internally. I need to turn this lens and turn it right around and be like, why am I frustrated? What am I conveying to other people that is causing them to act in a way that's not consistent with how I like them to be acting? And how can I change my behavior so then I can either get them to act the way that they want to be, or change my expectations so then I am more accurate and in line with where I should be in terms of my expectations. Is that correct?
Sure. We just have to, again, take a look at what's happening in front of us. Every person, family member, friend, coworker, anybody, a person in line at the store is going to be reflecting something about us, the way we feel. We might not be feeling that exact same way, but we're seeing it. And then how do we respond? Do we tap into the energy? Is the coworker angry about something, and then we get all angry at them about, we start to fuel it? Or do we see the anger that they're expressing, realize that we felt that way before, and then we have an opportunity to help transform the situation and make it better, so that we don't make it into, a negative cesspool. We shift it into a positive light and then come out of it both shining, Yeah.
I want to know what your triggers are. How do you kind of because that sounds, I don't want to say that sounds utopian, but I think I want to convey it in a way that, some people who are in their business are like, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable saying how I can shine, but I maybe put in another way where they can be like, okay, I'm frustrated. Who am I frustrated at? What am I frustrated at? Why am I frustrated? Almost like taking an internal inventory of the cause of the frustration. And I don't know, do you ever suggest people write it down and just put it out to the ether and just try to be as consciously aware of it as possible?
Well, I think that journaling is very important, because that is a personal self-reflection of you with yourself. You can write about your day. You can write about the things that you experience during the day, and then make a conscious decision to change it moving forward. We really can't feel bad. And the problem that we all have is we feel bad about the things that have happened. And sometimes rightfully so, but a lot of times rightfully no. It's just things that are part of being human. And I certainly have overreacted. I've certainly tapped into negative behavior. I did it for years in my former workplace because I just, couldn't see the forest for the trees. And I had to work on each tree. So, which was each feeling and each situation that was happening. So it's a matter of just, again, learning how we feel at every possible moment. A lot of times we're running on autopilot, so we're not thinking about it, and we're just kind of moving along. But the more that we can tap into what we're doing, then how we're feeling about it, then we can shift it.
So it sounds like perhaps a suggestion that you're making is in our mentor meetings, like in addition to the agendas, is when we meet with our mentor, perhaps we almost do like an internal feeling inventory of like, how did you feel this week? Or how did you feel this month? Or what were something that really frustrated you? What was a highlight? How did you, the specific feelings about it? Because I know the intentionality about feelings is so critical. I personally had to learn that growing up when I had made mistakes in my own past, just as a teenager, and understanding what that feeling is, not saying like, what is frustrating, but really what is the feeling that is causing that? Like, am I feeling mad? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling angry? Almost a feeling inventory in mentor meetings. Is that something you'd subscribe to, or do you ever do that yourself?
Sure. I think that I'm doing it right now with my mentor within the company. I do it with my friend and mentor all the time. We check in. And you do it a lot of times with your friends. So why don't you shift that into the workplace? Because really we're still all people, and it's an underlying drive mechanism because how we respond to things is based on the feeling that we have about it. So if we ask people how they are, and we say, hey, how are you doing? Did you have any issues today? What came up for you? What was your most positive part of the day? Why do you feel like that? Those are just, they're human interest, and it really creates a better bond with each other. And we can all use that. We're getting less, unfortunately right now, we're not able to really physically connect and feel that energy from people. So we really have to check in, virtually. And it's a good way to keep that connection. Not ideal, but it's better than nothing.
It almost seems like a paradigm. It almost sounds like you're suggesting a paradigm shift from the how are you doing to the how are you feeling. I think so often we'll jump into a conversation where I say, hey, how are you doing today? And someone's like, fine or good or whatever. They give the generic response, and it's almost like a casual, non-thinking conversation. But almost if we can transition it to how are you feeling today? And if someone says good, you can say, that's not a good's not a feeling. How are you feeling today? Tell me a feeling. And you actually are willing to hold them accountable and like hold them to it, to coming up with any feeling. You can almost get them to reinforce it. It makes me think of when I was a child, my grandma would always ask me like, Garrett, what'd you learn today? And I'd be like, oh, nothing. And, eventually she's like, well, we're not going to have dinner until you tell me something you learned today. And that forced me to really do an inventory of like, okay, what did I learn today? And then once I did, it stuck with me. I reinforced the knowledge that I had learned. And I would imagine that by sharing what feeling you're feeling in that given moment or that given day, whether you're in a mentor meeting or a meeting with colleagues or other coworkers, by doing almost a feeling inventory and asking them, hey, how are you feeling today? You can get to know them a whole lot better and empathize a whole lot more with whatever their circumstance and situation is.
Sure. Agreed. And you can help shift it by when we admit to how we feel, then it releases that energy. So no longer is it kind of sitting in the, in the gut. If we're having trouble with something, it allows us to vocalize it, and it opens up for a release, and then it makes it better. And the other person can empathize and also grow from the experience. So
same. I mean, I think you see this, I'm guilty of this. Yeah, I'll be, passive aggressive. I mean, right before this conversation, I was telling you about something I was frustrated at because I built up in my mind something that I wanted to have happen. And it didn't go exactly how I wanted it to happen, but ultimately I recognized it was something to do with me and not this other person. And honestly, just chatting with you about it and being open about it made me feel a whole lot better. I was like, you know what? It has to do with me, and that's okay. And like now I feel, because I've been able to put it out there into the ether, it helps me process it a whole lot more. And I think that's healthy. And I know sometimes we may think, oh, I want to separate work and personal life and feelings and that sort of stuff, but your feelings impact your work. And if you're not able to express your feelings at work, you as a leader of your business or a person who works within your business are at the mercy of the feelings of the people that you work with. And if they're negative and you're not actually consciously aware of that or having conversations about that, you are not able to maximize their own potential. Would you agree?
Agreed, yes. And you said the key thing about, and that's okay. Like when you had that dialogue with yourself and you released that energy and you felt better, hey, that was really me. I was generating that expectation that now it burst my bubble, but that's okay. And that's where we have to get on to the other side and then move along. We don't want to really perpetuate all the feelings to where people sit in them either. It's a matter of acknowledging it and moving it along, because nothing stays the same.
So true. And even as a mentor, in a mentoring relationship, our job isn't just this, agree with everything our mentor says. It is in part to challenge them. And when they say feelings that you can say, you know what, that might be something to do with you, not them. It's okay to say that. It's okay to flip the challenge script, because ultimately, if it helps make them a better person at work or just a better person in general, it'll make your working relationship a whole lot better. Because ultimately, if you get accustomed to meeting with somebody, whether it be in a mentoring relationship or a working relationship in general, and you only know this person as the person who complains constantly, they're just going to drain you. You're not going to want to be around them because they just frustrate you, and that's going to negatively impact your work. But if you can turn around to them and say, hey, I notice that you're frustrated. I know that's a feeling that you're having right now because of XYZ situation. What is that a mirror of? What are you potentially putting out to the world that's causing you to feel this way? And could you alter that? Just put it out there.
Well, I think that that opportunity can happen in a mentoring relationship, and it doesn't happen in every single one, unfortunately, because sometimes we're working with people and we're not getting exactly that deep, and we really need to monitor where we're coming from in order to try to change another person. Some people aren't ready for those type of things, and that's okay. But you can ask questions about how they feel, then, let it go and then keep going, and hopefully it shifts and they start to hear themselves and can shift it and become more aware of it. Sometimes it's baby steps and a piece of cookie, not the whole cake, or not the whole cookie. So
I see what you mean with that.
Yeah, when we're working on ourselves, it's not soapbox time, We've got to watch our intention of working with people who may not understand where we're at that point. And I think that's just being respectful and allowing people to be where they are and honor them, because we have to do the same things. A lot of times when we do inner work, we start to feel better, and then we want to change everybody around us. Not everybody's going to be at that place at that time. So it's very important to have patience for our own process, very important to have patience for other people's process. Does that make sense?
Makes tons of sense. And perhaps one of the questions that you were alluding to was even just for permission to give the feedback. That could be a nice softener of the blow, where it's like, hey, would you be all right if I gave you some feedback, or just asked you a question just to learn your thoughts a little bit deeper about this XYZ thing that you're going through? And by asking for permission, you are now giving them mental preparation for what you're about to say.
Absolutely. And then you'll make a conscious choice about how far down that road you go. Because if somebody's resistant, it's going to be very difficult. Or if they're angry, you don't talk about people's anger when they're angry. It's you're just welcoming a whole wave of stuff, usually. So that it's, again, as long as we're seeing ourselves and we can empathize and we can feel what we know that feeling, then we can navigate better in those relationships and then take actions that are appropriate. Not every action is going to be appropriate for every person. It's not a blanket end all be all.
That makes sense. I like that. Laura, this has been great. This has been very fascinating, insightful, interesting. Mirrors of ourselves, and just I love the accountability. I think that was such a key point that I took away from this. How can our audience learn more about you and your work?
Well, you can reach me at Team Horner Group. That's one way, but this type of work and these subjects are on AquarianAgeAwareness.com. I write several articles, and my good friend and mentor Julia also teaches the work one-on-one with people. So if you're wondering where this all comes from, my bio is there. It's, again, AquarianAgeAwareness.com.
Perfect. Well, Laura, this has been great. Thank you all for being here for this Lunch and Learn today. Laura, thank you for being here. This was incredible.
I really enjoyed it, Garrett. Thanks a lot.